daughter of Robert and Ada Shields. I was born February the 22nd, 1918. And I was the third child from the baby. Grew up in the city of Dallas, and I also received my education right here in Dallas. I went to N.W. Harley School, and I also went to Booker T. Washington High School, where I graduated. And at the time that I was going to high school, they hadn't integrated the schools then, so I could only go a half a day. We were so poor, Zach. We used to have a game we called jacks, and so everybody wasn't able to buy jacks. So we'd get some rocks about the same size. If we didn't do that, we'd get some peach seeds about the same size. That would be our jacks. We were taught to love one another and to share. My mom and my dad told us that if we didn't have anything but a slice of bread and a glass of water, don't go out and beg anyone. Just learn to be independent, and the Lord would bless us and treat people right. And so just take a bite off of that bread and sip off that water and pass it around, keep passing around till all 8 of us had a bite of bread and a sip of that water until it was gone. I was growing up as a girl. We didn't have washing machine. We had what you call the rub bowl. And then we had the number 3 tubs and the number 2 tubs. And we had a big old pot, what we called the washing pot. That would we borrow. What we do, we'd wash our clothes. And then this big cast iron heavy wash pot, have far up under there, and our water. We put a little lye in there. And what we do after we wash those clothes, put them in that pot, and they be just boiling up like a pot of cabbage green. And every once in a while we had a little stick where we go and punch it down and everything. We'd wash the clothes, put them in the boiling pot, and after we got them out of that boiling pot, we rinsed them in 3 waters. 2 was the white water, and that last water was the bluing water. And when we got through with that, then we were ready. Those clothes that had to be starched, we had Baldy starch, we had Argo starch. We'd had to cook that starch and make that starch. And then we'd starch those clothes that had to be starched. When I was born up in this is the same neighborhood I'm yet in, just a few blocks from it. I guess maybe about 4 blocks, if it's that much. But it was so different then, because the people were more godly. They were more godly, and most of them owned their own home. And even those that rented, they were just nice, wonderful people. But now in the neighborhood, the same neighborhood, we have so many have moved in here, selling drugs and doing other things that the old folks wouldn't have thought of.
Why do you think the change has happened?
Sin. My father, he worked at the Union Terminal, and the Lord blessed him. He was a coach cleaner, and it so happened that he cleaned coaches for the presidents of these railroad companies. And in so doing, when the cooks would come in, they would tell him, so, well, I've got all I want, Bobby. His name was Robert. So now you get what you want, and then you throw the rest of it onto the hill. And my father had a horse and a wagon, but he said he wasn't going to throw that onto the hills, because not only could he use it in his house, but he had neighbors that didn't have food. So he would bring that food home. Sometimes he'd have 3 tubs, iced down, with butter, with cream, sour cream. And that sour cream, what we do with that, my mother had a big old glass fruit jar. We put that sour cream in there and we shake it until the butter come. And when the butter come, we'd get the butter out of that jar, and we'd take some cold ice water and pour it where we could get it together and get it all together. And it was the best tasting butter. But back to when he'd come home and drive up in the driveway, there were neighbors that he'd always give food. They'd be glad to see him when he'd come home with that wagon loaded with those number 3 tubs. Mother would come and get what she's going to get. He said, you better call Miss Montgomery, you better call Belle Gilbert and Lucy Reese and all the rest of them, let them come and get what they can get. And honestly, our next door neighbors of Montgomery, they were so poor, where they'd replace these cross ties on the tracks. He'd bring them home. He'd give them the cross tie to cook the food with. We had wood cook stoves in. And then he had to let them use his axe to cut it up. They didn't even have an axe to cut the wood up. But I want to say that we all shared with each other. And in those days, if someone became sick, if it was a man, the men would go in together. And when they'd come from work, they'd all get together and go there, and they'd bathe that man, they'd shave that man. Had to do it in the number 3 tub, but they did it with joy. And if they had to sit that night, they'd sit that night with him until everything was well. They just did everything, and the women would do the cooking and carry there to help out the wife of the house with the children that she had. And when they did things like that for one another, they didn't talk about what they had did. They did it because they loved them and they wanted to be a help to them. In those days, they didn't have anything like welfare. They had to look solely to the Lord. But I thank God, in the year that President Franklin Delano Roosevelt came in office, he came in talking about the New Deal. And when he spoke of this New Deal, they didn't just give people food and give them money, but what they did, it was according to the number of children that was in that home. They gave them that many days' work, and that's the amount of food that they would give them. And then the truck would come once a month and would stop at the middle of the block, at the top of the hill, and people would go there with cotton picking sack to get what they had to give them, the food. But they didn't just give it to them to let them go sit down. They worked for it. And they'd give them enough amount of days to work that they had children in the families according to the number of days you had to work. And then for the young boys, when they became 18, they were able to go what they had a CC camp. And they'd go there and train. What they would do, they'd help fix the streets, the highways, and all. They didn't just give them like they just give them now, and they don't do anything, sit down. They had to work for it, and I think that was much better that way. And from then on, and then he also came in with the New Deal. There were people about to lose their home, because my daddy was one of them. We was buying a home right next door there at 415 Clee Street. And the monthly payments on that house was just $18. But time was so tight he didn't have that. And he was about to lose that home. So they came in with this New Deal, and they opened up what they call the Homeowners Loan Association. That is, the government would pay off the home, the federal government, and then give you a payment where you fixed amount where they knew you would be able to pay with the amount of children, the number of children that you had in the home. And I want to say that my daddy, being so proud, he and my mother, they didn't like to just go and just get a handout like. And so he said, so my mother said, well, Bob, are you going to go down there? He said, no, I don't think I will. And my daddy was very strict and firm. Children knew not to just talk and say things to him. But I looked at him, I said, Papa, we call him Papa. I said, you are not the man I took you to be. I said, now you will be able to save your home and pay for your home, and you too stubborn to go down there. I'm going to stop telling all of my classmates what a firm father that I have. I recall that my mother's oldest sister, it was her grandmother. Her name was Sally Matthews, and she came from Virginia. I shall never forget. Aunt Sally said that she was 3 years old when she was sold into slavery. And so they put them up on these auction blocks like. And the family that bought her, then they would give them their surname. And they brought her on back to Louisiana. She was a nice looking little old short woman. I doubt if she was 5 feet or wasn't much over 5 feet. And she looked like, I don't know, she might have had a little Indian or something mixed in or whatever, but she's pretty. She said what they would do, those that was pretty and everything, they would have them in the house as maid, where they work in the parlor, do the work around inside the house like. And the others that was of darker color, they put them out in the field. But she said she shall never forget and say her parents was just crying and she's crying to follow them. She didn't know what it was all about. But at 3 years old, she had to go. And so they carried her on back down to Louisiana. And I never shall forget Aunt Sally lived to be 100 and some years old. The first husband that I married, you know, God has said that which God has joined together, let no man put asunder. I just went out there and grabbed up something. But I grabbed up something, but I had to ask the Lord to help that something get away from me, because it wasn't for me. I just made a mistake when I got him. And so I never shall forget, your granddaddy, Mr. Boo, came one Sunday evening, and I told him, I said, do you know a good lawyer that I can get Mr. Boo? I said, this marriage, he said, I didn't think that was going to last either. So I did not think that, but I tell you what, said, I'm going to tell you one that is really good. And when I got my divorce at that time, divorces wasn't but $65, and some of them $50 and $30. You know that's been a long time ago. We nevertheless, the Lord blessed that to go on and go through, because he knew what was best. We had a neighbor that was rooming with some people next door to us, and she had 3 children. Her 2 older children were boys, and then her little girl, 18 months old, and that was during World War II. And sometimes she working as many as 2 and 3 places a day, trying to make ends meet. And she roomed with these people, and the little girl was just 18 months old. And so she's trying to keep up with her 2 brothers. So many times she would really need to be clean, you know, a little diaper would be hanging from her, wet soil and everything. So I called her to the fence there one day, and I called over to the house, and I gave her a bath, and I cleaned her up and everything. So after that, she'd come over, and she couldn't talk. She'd come to the screen, and she'd look in, and she'd like, ah! Letting me know she's there, you know. So I come just to buying clothes for her and everything. And from then, well, she come just to spending the night there, because mother kept her. And so she just went on and gave her to my mother and I. And I had 5 brothers. All 5 of them went off to war. And I never shall forget, my baby brother had just come out of high school, graduated. He was just 18. And so my mom, she wrote President Roosevelt a letter, told him there's a last child, and would he please spare him? He told her he's sorry, but duty was calling him. So I had 2 brothers in the South Pacific, and then I had 3 in the European theater. But I never shall forget, my mother would get up in church, and she'd always testify ever so often that she's down in the foxholes right with them, only she's at home in her foxhole. They were there fighting, but she's in her foxhole in prayer with God, and said he had promised me that he's going to send every one of them back home, just like they left. So the pastor of the church at that time, Elder Cox, said he told his wife, so now I'm going to watch this. Did she keep telling that ever so often? She testified that. So 1 year went by, no son. 2 years went by, no son. 3 years went by, no son. 4 years went by, and going into that 5th year, I never shall forget, he said, she said, Mother, I'm going to tell you, so I've been watching you. Said, that Sunday night, she got up and said, Lord, so fix it that my baby son came in yesterday morning. And so my son next to the baby son, he came in this morning. So that was 2 of those 5 sons. Next thing we know, about a week time, another son. About 2 weeks time, another son. Then finally, all 5 of them was back home. And my baby brother, he got a little wound, but not too much. And they said that when they were over there fighting, it brought about a great change as far as race was concerned, because there wasn't no race there. So they were all just like one. And they had some of their closest friends among the other race. So because it wasn't, because they was there fighting. My brother that's next to me, he never did go out on battlefield. He was just a cook. And he said where he was, he never shall forget the people that was just starving like. And by him being the cook, there'd always the leftover, they just wouldn't throw them away. He'd wrap them up real nice, but they put them out there where they carried the trash. But they let them know what was there. And so many times he just get to some of the time they didn't even touch the food. He'd get that good part of the chicken and all of that, put it out there and say, never shall forget that when D-Day was declared and it's over, those people just wept. So what are we going to do to eat now? And while he and my baby brother was over there, they learned how to speak French fluently. And he yet speaks fluently French, you know. So they all came back home, as my mother said the Lord had promised her. And nothing happened to them. And then when they got back here, they still had segregation. They still had to sit behind the signs. But it wasn't too long after that God so fixed it, and as he would have it, I never shall forget that the streetcars were still on, and the buses was running. Got on the bus, and there was one white lady. She got on, she took, and she told him, she stood up, she said, sit anywhere you want to sit this morning. Just anywhere you want to sit, so you don't have to look for no certain seat. Wherever you want to sit, you sit there. So this thing has been fixed. Aren't you glad? But my mother and father always taught us, don't hate anybody. Because remember, it's good and bad and all races. And so whatever's to be, if you just trust God and believe God, so he'll work that thing out and fix it. So don't you be ugly like the other fella, because he will fix it for you. And there were places we couldn't eat. And if we went to like to have hamburger places and things like that, or either restaurant, if you ate there, they'd hand you your food out the window, in the kitchen window. You couldn't go up front and sit where they were to eat. And although you were cooking in there and cooking the food, and then there was some, if they wanted to eat, they'd have to come on in there and sit around where the cooks were and the thing. They couldn't eat out front like the other thing. But we went through it all of that, and God had blessed us. And we are yet here. And so one thing about it, if you have the love of God in your heart, that God, we must always remember, have for you. Can't nobody keep you from it but yourself. If we please God and walk upright before him and live in his will, whatever God's got for us, we gonna get it. And can't nobody keep us from it. But our heart's got to be right. There were certain stores like Neiman Marcus. All we could do is pass by there and look in there. You couldn't go in there and buy anything if you were black. But Lord fixed that, because there were so many that worked in the home of the people where they worked. They would find out their size that they wanted, and they just offered it to them. They didn't even have to ask them. But now it comes to the place where all it takes is the money. You can go in Neiman and any of the other stores. All you have to have is some money. I walked in that morning, and your father said, Edith said, I want to talk to you this morning before I leave. I said, well, all right. So when he had closed the door, he said, I got a question I want to ask you. He said, it's really troubling me. So my family, they're trying to decide on whether we'll just invite the blacks to the funeral or leave them out. So some of them is against me. They said, I don't know what to do. I want you to help me make the decision. I said, I tell you what. I said, with God, it's no color. I said, invite those people. I said, you don't know what you might miss. Only God knows. I said, if I was you, I'd invite them. I said, let family members be angry with you. I said, yeah, they'll come around. God will fix it. When he come back, he said, Edith, I am so glad. This black minister, when he got up, he spoke something your granddaddy had ever told him. Whenever he bought a piano for the church where he attended, he'd buy this. Whatever he bought for the church where he attended, he'd buy that same thing for the black church. Organ, he bought it for them. Give offering in his church, he'd give it to the black. And he said, Edith, we would have never known about these things. So because Dad never mentioned them. And said, can you believe he joined church over the phone? I was working with Mr. Zachary Booth, Z.A. Booth and Mrs. Z.A. Booth, which was very nice people. They were very nice. I recall one morning, he said, Edith, I want you to stop coming around to the back, coming through that gate. So you come through this front door. So you ring that doorbell if you haven't got a key. He said, we don't have that here. He was very nice to me. And I recall also that there were times when I would babysit with their only little girl, Nan. I started working for them when Nan was just 3 weeks old. He was just in out of the service. And in working for them at that time, sometimes they'd want to go to the movie. Then they'd get me to stay in and babysit her until they came back from the movie. And he'd bring me home. And I never shall forget that his daddy, they had a business there located near the zoo. But anyway, when he came home one night, he said, Edith, what have you been doing, sitting up there nodding? So, well, if you can put your fingers in the dough and fix our biscuits and cook our food and take care of the baby, I don't see no reason why you can't go get in that bed and stretch out. And that was unusual at that time because they just didn't permit things like that to take place. And so I saw so many different things that they did was so different from some of the homes where I had worked. I recall one home where I had worked. I was there one evening and I had served the dinner. They had finished eating at the table. And I was clearing the dishes away to carry them back into the kitchen. And so the lady that I was working for, her sister said, why don't you go and sit down there and eat while all the food is on the table? So, why wait till you get all the food back in the kitchen and then you got to try to fix your plates? It's such a small place. I said, oh, that doesn't matter. She said, just sit on there and fix your plate. And her sister came by in a low tone of voice. She acted like she was looking at something on the table. She said, I don't want to ever catch you eating at my table sitting there anymore. That was on a Thursday evening. I took her at her word. So that next evening was my payday, so I received my payday. And certain about me being 18, I didn't go back. My mother and my father always taught them love, taught each of us love. And then what made it so effective in our life, they gave us love. They didn't teach segregation and hatred. They give us to know, you go on to school and you get your education, because it's not going to be like this always. So God will bring about a change. So we don't know if we'll be living to see the change, but the change is coming. We were always taught, if an individual don't love you, you love them. So you can please God, and good will follow you. See, like I tell the young people now, I have so much of the love of God in my heart. I don't have no room for no hate, no covetousness, no malice, or any of those things. All I got room for is love, joy, peace, and happiness.